I started with a regular vintage Poseable baby Pug Spare. Now, as you can see, inside the toy, the arms are connected. They're connected by a rod that goes straight across in the inside if you've never looked inside. And I didn't like how the arms were posed on the character. I didn't like that one arm has to be up and one arm has to be down. So I ended up taking off the head, cutting through the rod, and removing the arms so they could be posed separately. Another thing I didn't really like about the originals was that the baby and the adult are almost the same size. There's very little difference in their height, and I felt that the babies should be a smaller scale than the adults. So here's the original size and the original figure. What I ended up doing was taking the figure and then doing some sculpting. Instead of a hair curl, I ended up making these little pieces of hair on the side that were molded on, rather like how the model sheet looked. Same thing with the cheeks. Gave them a bit of a fuzzy look, not so smooth. I made the cheeks a little bit wider, so it had more of a babyish proportion. And also, I made the muzzle just a little bit smaller, because again, on the babies, you're supposed to have really large heads and really chubby cheeks and smaller features. You might also be able to see that I raised the arms. So now the arms join the body much higher to the head instead of in the middle of the torso. I also didn't like how on the original Poseable figures, the babies have no tails, and the tails are clearly visible when you're looking at the animations. On the figures that I made, I created a small tail. You'll also notice that I shrunk down the size. I feel that this slightly smaller size is more proportionate to how the babies ought to look. And again, here is an original Poseable figure, and this is the newer size of the baby, which is smaller, and I feel more to scale. This was my original figure of the Proud Heart cat that I was working on. I did some of the sculpting details in clay, and as you can see, some of them have actually fallen off. There used to be more frills along the edge of the face to indicate the edges of the bonnet, but they've since dried up and fallen off. But that's okay, because I got the mold before that happened. Once I had the figures completed, it was time for painting. What I did was added the frilly edges of his bonnet. I added a little bow tie, which is part of his little coat. And I added a long, more cat-like tail.